The desperation of the Chinese people seems to be growing throughout the nation as more and more protests are turning into masses of people kneeling, bowing, crying and begging to Chinese Communist Party officials. Is this a sign that the Chinese people are getting back to their traditional roots of the action of kowtowing? Or is it that they are in such a state of despair that they simply feel they have no other way to express themselves anymore? Welcome to China Insights. This month, the footage of this elderly Chinese auntie begging an official went viral on the Chinese internet. In total desperation, the woman shakes and cries like a child, bursting into tears while holding the leg of the official and then putting her head on his thigh, while he treats her with such disdain that you'd think she was a bothersome animal. What happened was that this woman was using her tricycle to collect scrap and waste materials in China's Fujian province. Then this man, a community security officer, which is not a high official position in itself, impounded the woman's tricycle and refused to release it unless she pays a fine. Obviously, the elderly woman doesn't have a lot of money if she's collecting scraps, and many netizens believe the officer is trying to extort her. But the woman couldn't pay, so she followed the officer and begged him as he coldly ate his meal, and she cried in total desperation. Many netizens were furious that the security officer treated the elderly woman this way, saying, "Since the security guards changed from the white uniforms to satisfy their official desire, their power has skyrocketed." Even a rubbish security guard has experienced the feeling of Xi's pig-headed throne with all the power in the world. Another said, "Give him some power, and he will make things difficult for you." Here a young man desperately pleads with urban management officers, Chengguang officers. He says, "I have a child at home. I am begging you, brother. Brother, I beg you, please don't fine me. It's not just me doing something like this. Why do you fine me? Brother, please don't fine me. I have no money. Please, things are too hard. Brother, I beg you. I am kneeling to you." This Chinese woman is crying out on the street and begging Chinese officials to allow her to open her store and sell her goods so that she can take care of her children. She says it's been 6 years that she's been trying to deal with the authorities and she seems to be at her wit's end. She's saying, "For 6 years I have never given up. No matter even if it's high temperatures, I bring my 3 kids out on the street in Beijing. I just want them to give me a fair reason. I want to open a store without them retaliating against me. As an average citizen, I cannot succeed. Every official department they have has victimized me for 6 years. But I have 3 kids I have to raise. I have to pay my mortgage. I haven't earned a penny in 6 years. They make me come out and sell my goods on the street, expecting that this can support my 3 kids. She says to the officials, "You are doing illegal things yourself, and yet you still come and bother with me." There are so many citizens begging officials on their knees these days that Chinese netizens have given them a name, kneelers, or 鬼族 in Chinese, which is a creative pun, because the same pronunciation can also be written with different characters, which means an aristocrat. Chinese netizens always seem to be able to come up with a way to make light of a serious situation. Many of these protesters are owners of unfinished properties from different parts of the country, begging authorities for property rights and calling for injustices to be undone. Others are victims of investment crashes, such as the collapsed Zhongrong Trust in Shanghai and the Haiyin investment crash, and they are begging for the police to conduct an investigation. In Kaifeng, Henan province, this man lay on the ground in desperation. Then he got up to his knees and bowed while crying out to an official, "Mr. Bao, I kowtow to you." Seeing this, the security guard took him away, while the man continued to cry out about injustice that had been done to him. In Jiaotong, Jiangsu province, Owners of unfinished buildings knelt outside the government building to defend their rights. In the city of Jiangjiakou, these local residents kneeled down and crawled on the street to beg local authorities to do something for them. They crawled on their knees in a long line across the large intersection, touching their hands to the ground and also their foreheads to the ground as they cried out in desperation. This elderly man's kneeling got him nowhere. After retirement, there is no one to care for them anymore, and he felt his only option was to kneel and beg for help. These Chinese people knelt in front of a government building for hours begging for help, yet no one even bothered to come out to talk to them. This couple are the parents of the child pictured on the banner they are holding. They are kneeling and begging the authorities to help them get justice for their murdered son, whose body was found in a horrific case. Only the child's torso was found, while the limbs, head and kidneys were all missing. It seems that begging on knees to Chinese officials is becoming commonplace throughout the entire nation, indicating a greater desperation of the Chinese populace. Even in Tibet, earlier this year, Tibetans knelt in front of Chinese authorities, who are forcing Tibetan settlers to relocate near the Yangtze River. Such forced relocations have become commonplace, uprooting Tibetans from their ancestral home and ways of life. And it's humiliating for them to have to drop to their knees and beg authorities to allow them to live on their own land. But they are so desperate that that's what they are doing. And it's not just citizens at lower levels of society who are taking a knee in desperation. This man, Liu Jingyi, is a respected law professor and a rights lawyer who still teaches at the Central National University. After the Sanya City Central Court dismissed the case he was working on, Professor Liu led his clients to appeal and kneeled with them in solidarity. Professor Liu said that the court's action had no legal basis at all, and therefore no legal process was left. It was a pity that I had no choice but to kneel, he said. Seeing the image of a respected law professor kneeling got the attention of Chinese netizens and CCP authorities. The propaganda committee member of the local town told reporters in Nandu that kneeling and appealing is not appropriate, which was a sign that Professor Liu's efforts were actually making a difference. Traditionally in China, getting on your knees is considered the greatest respect towards someone. But when it's done as a form of begging, it's seen as the greatest form of shame. It's ironic then that the first line of the CCP's national anthem is about standing up and not kneeling. Stand up, the people who don't want to be slaves, is the first line of the anthem, which has become part of the CCP's efforts to replace China's traditional culture with its modern Communist Party culture. In this video from 2020 during the COVID pandemic, the Chinese police officer in black uniform keeps ordering this man to kneel down. The man refuses to kneel and says he would rather die on his feet than live on his knees. The police then order the other officers to handcuff the man to a tree. During the later stage of lockdowns in China, in the Hanzhou region of Guangzhou City, 2 women had their hands bound and were forced to kneel, apparently because they talked back to epidemic prevention officers, and one of the women apparently did not wear a mask when collecting her takeaway food. Netizens are comparing how differently Chinese citizens act inside China and outside China. Here, a Chinese man screams in protest at the Yasukuni Shrine of Japan without any fear or shame or remorse, with a full voice and large stature. Yet, in comparison, back in China, the Chinese people are on their knees and begging. A netizen commented, "Some people are tigers in civilized societies, but chickens in totalitarian societies." So traditionally, why do Chinese people kowtow anyway? The act of kowtowing, kowtow, or kneeling and bowing deeply so that one's forehead touches the ground, has deep cultural and historical roots in Chinese society. These are some of the main reasons why people have kowtowed in China. for respect and reverence. In ancient China, kowtowing was a way of showing deep respect and reverence to elders, ancestors, and people of higher social status. This gesture symbolized humility and recognition of the other person's authority or wisdom, often seen in familial contexts or when paying respects to ancestors. Spiritual and religious significance. In religious practices, especially in Buddhism and Taoism, kowtowing is an act of devotion, humility, and submission to spiritual beings, deities, or ancestors. It is a form of worship, demonstrating reverence and seeking blessings or forgiveness. Loyalty and allegiance. In Imperial China, kowtowing was a formal gesture of loyalty to the emperor, who was regarded as the Son of Heaven. Subjects would perform this ritual to acknowledge the emperor's supreme authority, often during ceremonies or when presenting tributes. Apology and sincerity. Kowtowing has also been used as a way to apologize sincerely, especially when someone seeks forgiveness for a serious offense. The act shows vulnerability, humility, and expresses genuine remorse and a willingness to accept fault. Cultural tradition and filial piety. Rooted in Confucian values, kowtowing reflects filial piety, which is respect for one's parents and ancestors. It was customary for children to kowtow to their parents or elders during significant family occasions, as a sign of respect and gratitude for their care and guidance. Here in northern China's Shandong province, on the first day of the Chinese New Year, people are paying their respects and giving their New Year greetings to a 93-year-old elder. This is still a common sight in culturally conservative parts of the country. While kowtowing is less common in modern Chinese society, it is still performed during traditional ceremonies like the Chinese New Year, religious rituals, and sometimes as a sign of deep respect for ancestors, especially during events like the Qingming Festival, the Tomb Sweeping Day, which is a traditional Chinese holiday that honors ancestors and welcomes the spring in early April each year. So why today are modern Chinese people kowtowing to Chinese officials? In today's China, the act of kowtowing as a form of appeal to officials is not part of formalized interactions with authorities, because the act of bowing is connected to the traditions before the Communist Party took over the country. However, begging on knees is happening more frequently throughout the country now, as people feel desperate or powerless to seek to communicate their deep need for assistance or justice. Kneeling is a symbol of desperation. In moments of extreme frustration or desperation, particularly when all other avenues for redress seem to have failed, some individuals or families may turn to kowtowing as a way to visibly display their helplessness and profound need for intervention. This act serves as a dramatic plea for attention, hoping to move officials or onlookers to sympathize with their plight. Appeals for justice. Some people use kowtowing as a form of appeal when they believe they've been treated unjustly or when they feel neglected by the legal or bureaucratic system. For instance, victims of land disputes, wrongful convictions, or corruption may kowtow to government officials to draw attention to their grievances. Public display for awareness. Modern appeals often take place in public places, or even in front of government buildings, where the act of kowtowing can attract the attention of passers-by or the media or people who will publish on social media. This public setting transforms kowtowing into both a plea to officials and a tactic for social awareness, amplifying the call for help. Cultural expression of sincerity and humility. For some, especially older individuals or those from rural areas where traditional practices are more valued, kowtowing is seen as a profound gesture of humility. The act shows that the individual is not necessarily challenging the official, but is instead humbly begging for help, signaling respect for authority while appealing to a higher moral or ethical duty. Impact of digital and social media. In today's digital world, images or videos of people kowtowing as a form of protest or appeal often go viral, bringing heightened public scrutiny to the issues they're facing. This phenomenon has made the gesture more visible and in some cases more effective in raising awareness and gaining public sympathy for certain social injustices. So while it's not part of formal protocol, this form of modern-day kowtowing reflects a mix of traditional humility and modern social activism, especially when people feel unheard and seek to leverage cultural gestures to push for justice or assistance. It is also a sign that Chinese people have not forgotten their roots in Chinese traditions, as they seek forms from ancient ways to express themselves. However, we've seen images of Chinese people being forced to kneel, and that's different to those who are kneeling out of desperation. When people in China are forced to kneel before or figures of authority, such as police, teachers, parents, or officials, it is generally perceived as a form of humiliation and submission. This forced kneeling in contemporary Chinese society can carry significant implications, such as it's being a symbol of authority and control. In instances where people are forced to kneel, it often reflects the enforcer's assertion of dominance, authority, or power over the individuals. The gesture compels the individual to physically lower themselves, symbolizing their submission and acknowledgement of the other's control. This act can be especially degrading when done publicly, as it highlights the power imbalance. Public shaming and humiliation. Forced kneeling is sometimes used as a tool of public shaming. This can be seen as an attempt to instill a sense of guilt, dishonor, or remorse in the person being made to kneel, especially if the kneeling is done in front of others. This public humiliation of this kind is a powerful deterrent used to make an example of someone to enforce social norms or rules. Punishment or coercion. Forced kneeling is sometimes used as a form of punishment or to extract confessions, apologies, or remorse. In extreme cases, such as those involving police or officials, the forced kneeling can also be seen as a coercive tactic, especially if individuals are pressured into making confessions or apologies as part of a disciplinary action. Violation of dignity and rights. In modern Chinese society, forced kneeling is increasingly viewed as an abuse of power and a violation of human dignity and rights. There is a growing recognition, especially among younger and urban populations, that forced kneeling is dehumanizing and unjust. Cases where people are forced to kneel often receive strong public backlash, particularly if videos or images of the incident circulate online. Social and legal implications. Forced kneeling, especially when imposed by officials in government positions or police, is controversial because it can lead to public outrage. In recent years, reports of such incidents have drawn attention to the misuse of power by authorities, sparking discussions on accountability and human rights in China. These incidents can also attract legal repercussions or disciplinary measures for the authorities involved if they are seen as overstepping their power. In this video, these 3 elementary schoolgirls were denied entry to their school because they were late to school. They knelt down and begged for mercy to allow them to enter the school, which seemed to have worked after some time. A netizen posted this video of an elementary teacher handing out papers to students, tossing the papers on the floor by her feet and making the young students come and pick up the papers from the ground. The netizen questioned whether this is part of the cultural education instilled in China today that might make them more submissive towards figures of authority, but many Chinese movies still show scenes from more traditional times, when officials or regular citizens would kneel and kowtow to the emperor. This boy is copying what he sees on television, but his dad doesn't want him to learn it. There are major cultural significant differences between kowtowing and being forced to kneel. Kowtowing is generally a voluntary act. It is performed willingly as a gesture of respect, humility, devotion, especially in cultural, religious, or family contexts. The individual chooses to lower themselves to express respect, gratitude, or apology. Being forced to kneel, as the term suggests, is an involuntary act imposed on someone by an authority figure or other people. This act can feel demeaning or humiliating, as it is usually compelled by someone else to display submission or remorse. These children are all being forced to kowtow to their parents at a large public event. Citizens and netizens complained about the difference between teaching a positive action of traditional respect versus being forced to do an action that the state wants to be filmed for publicity. There is another type of bowing that shouldn't be confused with the kowtow, and that is prostration. They are both forms of physical gestures involving bowing, but they differ in cultural significance, form, and context. The term kowtow comes from the Chinese words kowtow, meaning knock head. It specifically refers to the act of kneeling and touching the forehead to the ground, often multiple times. Where prostration is a broader term for a full body gesture, where a person usually lies face down on the ground, often with arms extended or positioned alongside the body. This form of gesture is common in many cultures and religions and represents a deep act of submission, humility, or worship before a deity or spiritual authority. So while the kowtow symbolizes respect, submission, and sometimes apology, prostration generally represents devotion, humility, and worship, particularly in spiritual contexts. It is often an expression of one's complete surrender to a higher power or acknowledgement of divine presence. The traditional Chinese culture includes a variety of expressions, proverbs, and literary references involving kneeling. While not all specifically address kneeling per se, they often reflect ideas of respect, submission, humility, and loyalty associated with the act. Here are some famous quotations and saying relevant to kneeling in Chinese culture. 男儿膝下有黄金. A man's knees hold gold beneath them. This phrase suggests that a man should not kneel easily, as kneeling represents submission and humility. A man should reserve such gestures for truly worthy moments or figures of respect, as it reflects personal dignity and integrity. 宁可站着死，不愿跪着生. Better to die standing than to live kneeling. This quote, similar in sentiment to its Western counterpart, underscores the importance of personal dignity, courage, and integrity. It conveys the idea that it is better to face hardship with pride than to submit in shame. 千里跪母, kneeling to the mother from 1,000 miles away. This expression originates from a tale of filial piety, where a son travels thousands of miles to pay his respects to his mother. It emphasizes the virtue of filial piety, xiao, and respect for one's parents, suggesting that a child should always revere their parents, even over long distances. 跪天跪地，不如跪父母. Kneeling to the heavens and earth is not as important as kneeling to one's parents. This phrase reinforces the Confucian value of filial piety, placing parents above all others in terms of reverence and respect. It suggests that honoring one's parents holds the highest form of respect, even above spiritual or natural entities. 一日为师，终身为父. One day as a teacher, a lifetime as a father. Although not specifically mentioning kneeling, this phrase reflects the deep respect and reverence traditionally given to teachers. It implies that a teacher deserves respect akin to that given to a parent, which in older times might have included gestures like kneeling as a sign of gratitude and respect. 君要臣死，臣不得不死. If the ruler commands a minister to die, the minister has no choice but to comply. This is an expression of the loyalty and submission expected of a subject to their ruler in ancient times. It conveys the strong sense of duty and obedience that might lead one to kneel or even sacrifice oneself in service to authority. These quotations from traditional Chinese culture reflect the importance of respect, dignity, self-reliance, and filial piety, which are core values in Chinese culture. Kneeling in these contexts symbolizes the depth of respect and reverence people hold, particularly toward parents, teachers, and authority figures. But things have changed in modern China. And so while China has a rich tradition of kneeling and bowing with respect and humility, the modern trend of the kneeling protesters is not the same thing, and it has citizens and observers concerned about the future of China and the Chinese people. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe for more China insights.